Sophia stood in the doorway of what used to be her bedroom, watching them divide her dead husband's belongings like vultures over a carcass. His mother held up his watch, the one Sophia had saved for months to buy him, and smiled. James would have wanted Oliver to have this. His sister Ava didn't even look up from the jewelry box. Obviously, Sophia didn't earn any of this anyway. They spoke as if she were already gone, as if she were already dead too, and maybe part of her was. Before we continue, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment your country. I love knowing how far these stories travel. The funeral had been 3 days ago. 3 days since they'd lowered James into the ground. 3 days since Sophia had become a widow at 32. And in those 3 days, not one person in his family had asked if she was okay. They had asked about the house, about James's savings account, about whether she planned to move on quickly so they could figure out arrangements. Arrangements. As if she were a piece of furniture they needed to relocate. Sophia pressed her palm against the doorframe, her legs suddenly unsteady. The bedroom looked strange now, emptied of James's presence, but filled with his family's greed. They descended on the house the morning after the funeral, armed with garbage bags and accusations disguised as concern. "I think we should take the good dishes," James's mother, Patricia, had announced at breakfast, not asking, just stating. "They were my grandmother's originally. Family heirlooms should stay in the family." The implication was clear. Sophia wasn't family. Not anymore. Maybe she never had been. And the car, Oliver, James's younger brother, had added. "James promised I could have it if anything ever happened to him." James had promised no such thing. Sophia knew because she'd been there for every conversation, every plan, every late-night worry about the future. But she'd said nothing. She'd learned years ago that her voice didn't carry weight in this family. Now, watching Patricia stuff James's clothes into bags with the efficiency of someone cleaning out a storage unit, Sophia felt something crack inside her chest. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet and complete, like ice breaking under pressure. "I made dinner," she heard herself say. The room went silent. 3 heads turned toward her. Patricia, Ava, and Oliver. Their expressions ranging from surprise to irritation. "What?" Ava said. "Dinner. I made lasagna. It's still warm." Sophia's voice sounded distant to her own ears, like it was coming from someone else's body. "I thought, after everything today, you might be hungry." Patricia's face softened into something that might have been pity if it weren't so condescending. "Oh, Sophia, that's sweet, but we were actually planning to go out. There's so much to discuss about the estate, and it's easier at a restaurant where we won't be distracted." Distracted by her, she meant. Distracted by the woman who'd been married to James for 8 years, who'd slept beside him every night, who'd held his hand when the cancer got so bad he couldn't remember his own name. "Right," Sophia whispered. "Of course." She turned to leave, but Ava's voice stopped her. "Actually, Sophia, while we have you here, we need to talk about your plans." Sophia turned back slowly. "My plans? For moving?" Oliver stood up, brushing dust off his expensive jeans. "The house is too big for one person, and frankly, the mortgage is substantial. We think it would be better to sell and divide the proceeds among the family. You understand. The family, not including her." "This is my home," Sophia said, but even to her own ears it sounded weak. "Uncertain." "Technically," Patricia said, "James bought this house before you were married. And given that you never contributed financially, I took care of him." The words came out sharper than Sophia intended. "I took care of all of you." Ava laughed, actually laughed, the sound sharp and cruel in the half-empty room. "Took care of us?" "Sophia, you were unemployed. You cooked some meals and played house. That's not exactly a contribution." Heat flooded Sophia's face. "I raised your children, Ava. When you were too busy with your career, who picked Lucas up from school every day, who helped him with his homework, who sat with him in the hospital when he had pneumonia and you were stuck at a conference. I paid you back for that," Ava said coldly. "You gave me $50. Once. Well, what did you expect? James had a good job. You weren't exactly struggling." Sophia's hands were shaking now. 8 years of swallowed words were rising up her throat, threatening to choke her. "I managed this entire household. I coordinated your mother's doctor appointments, all of them. I picked up your prescriptions, Patricia. I drove you to physical therapy 3 times a week for 6 months. I organized every family gathering, every holiday, every birthday party. I kept James's business records when he was too sick to do it himself. And we're very grateful, Patricia interrupted, her voice dripping with false warmth. But gratitude doesn't equal ownership, dear. You need to be realistic about your situation. Realistic. The word hit Sophia like a slap. Her situation was this. She was 32, had no recent work history because she'd spent nearly a decade being the family's unpaid assistant, had no savings of her own because every penny James earned had gone into their accounts that his family was now claiming weren't really hers. And she was standing in a house full of people who'd used her like a servant and were now discarding her like trash. I think, Oliver said, checking his watch, we should give you some time to process all this. We'll come back next week to discuss the details. Maybe talk to a lawyer, figure out what you're actually entitled to, what she was entitled to. As if 8 years of her life, of her love, of her labor, could be calculated in legal terms and found wanting. They filed past her, one by one, leaving her standing alone in the hallway. Patricia squeezed her shoulder as she passed, a gesture that might have seemed comforting if Sophia couldn't feel how eager the woman was to leave. The front door closed. The house fell silent. Sophia walked to the kitchen on autopilot. The lasagna sat on the counter, still warm, cheese golden and perfect. She'd made it with ricotta she'd prepared herself, with the special Italian sausage James had loved, following the recipe his grandmother had supposedly passed down through the family. She picked up the entire dish and walked to the garbage can. For a long moment, she just stood there, holding 9 pounds of food she'd spent 3 hours making. Then she turned the pan over and watched it all slide into the trash. The first week after they took the house, Sophia moved into a studio apartment above a laundromat. It was all she could afford with the pittance James's family's lawyer had determined she was entitled to. A small settlement they'd called generous, delivered with paperwork she'd been too exhausted to fight. The apartment smelled like detergent and mildew. The walls were thin enough that she could hear every conversation, every argument, every moment of her neighbors' lives. At night, she lay on a mattress on the floor because she couldn't afford a bed frame, and stared at a ceiling stained with water damage, and felt herself disappearing. This was rock bottom, she thought. This was what happened when you built your entire life around people who saw you as furniture. Her phone rang sometimes. Never the family, of course, but old friends. Women she'd lost touch with over the years because she'd been too busy managing everyone else's life to maintain her own. They meant well, their voices bright with forced cheerfulness. We should get coffee. Are you doing okay? Let me know if you need anything. But Sophia could hear what they weren't saying. She could hear the pity, the relief that it wasn't them, the quiet judgment about how she'd let herself become so dependent, so small. She stopped answering. Instead, she got a job. The only one she could find with her resume, 8 years of nothing but homemaker, was as a receptionist at a dental office. Minimum wage, no benefits, but it was something. It was proof she existed in the world as more than just James's widow, more than Patricia's errand girl, more than Ava's free childcare. Dr. Morrison, the dentist who hired her, was a woman in her 50s with short gray hair and kind eyes. She didn't ask many questions about the gap in Sophia's employment history, just nodded when Sophia mentioned she'd been caring for a sick spouse. That's real work, Dr. Morrison said simply. Doesn't always get counted, but it's real work. Sophia had to excuse herself to the bathroom to cry. The job was mindless, answering phones, scheduling appointments, filing insurance claims. But it was hers. For the first time in 8 years, Sophia had something that belonged to her alone, something no one could claim they deserved more than she did. She started waking up at 5:30 to walk to the bus stop. Started packing lunches in containers she bought at a dollar store. Started existing in the world again, even if she felt like a ghost of herself. Even if every interaction with another human being felt like she was speaking from the bottom of a well. At night, in her apartment that smelled like other people's laundry, she created a routine. She'd heat up ramen or soup on the hot plate she'd bought secondhand. She'd wash her one pot and one bowl. And then she'd sit on her mattress and scroll through her phone, looking at the life that used to be hers. Patricia had posted photos from a family dinner. Everyone gathered around the table in what used to be Sophia's dining room, laughing, glasses of wine raised. The caption read, "Family is everything. Grateful for these moments." 2 hearts. Sophia wasn't in the photo. She'd been cropped out of the family narrative as efficiently as she'd been removed from the house. 3 months into her new life, Sophia was at the front desk when the office door opened, and a woman walked in who looked like everything Sophia used to want to be. Confident, put together, like she owned the space she occupied. "Hi," the woman said, approaching the desk with a warm smile. "I'm Caroline. I have a 2 o'clock with Dr. Morrison." Sophia checked the schedule, her hands moving automatically. "Yes, I have you right here. If you'll just fill out these forms." "Oh, I'm not a patient," Caroline said, laughing. "I'm interviewing for the hygienist position. I'm early, bad habit of mine. Mind if I wait?" She sat down in the waiting area, and Sophia tried to focus on her work, but she kept catching glimpses of Caroline from the corner of her eye. The woman was reading a book, something with a worn cover that suggested she'd read it multiple times. She had a coffee from somewhere expensive, and she was wearing scrubs that somehow looked fashionable. When Dr. Morrison came out to get Caroline, she paused at Sophia's desk. "Hold my calls for the next hour, please." Then to Caroline, "I think you're going to fit in perfectly here." And she did. Caroline started the following week, and from the first day, she treated Sophia like they'd been friends for years. She brought extra coffee. She made jokes that actually made Sophia laugh. She asked questions that suggested she saw Sophia as a person, not just the woman at the front desk. "So what's your story?" Caroline asked one day during lunch, sitting beside Sophia on the bench outside the office. "And don't say you don't have one. Everyone has a story." Sophia picked at her sandwich. "It's not very interesting. Try me." And somehow, sitting there in the weak sunshine of a November afternoon, Sophia found herself talking. Not about everything. Not about the humiliation or the betrayal or the way she'd been discarded. But about James. About how they'd met. About how he'd been kind and funny, and how she'd thought she was building a life with someone who valued her. "He sounds like he was a good person," Caroline said when Sophia finished. "He was. It was his family who." Sophia trailed off, surprised at her own bitterness. Caroline didn't push. She just nodded, sipped her coffee, and said, "Families can be complicated." It was such a simple statement, but it felt like permission. Permission to be angry. Permission to feel betrayed. Permission to acknowledge that something terrible had been done to her. Over the following weeks, Caroline became Sophia's anchor to normalcy. They fell into an easy friendship. Lunch together most days, occasional after-work coffee, text messages that were just funny observations about their day. Caroline never asked for more than Sophia could give. Never pushed her to talk about things she wasn't ready to share. One evening, Caroline invited Sophia to her apartment for dinner. It was small but cozy, filled with plants and books and art that suggested Caroline had a life full of her own interests and passions. "I made too much pasta," Caroline said, which they both knew was a lie. "Figured you might save me from eating leftovers all week." They ate together at Caroline's tiny kitchen table, and for the first time in months, Sophia felt something that resembled peace. She wasn't performing. She wasn't trying to be enough for people who would never see her as sufficient. She was just existing, being, and it was enough. "Can I ask you something?" Caroline said as they were cleaning up. Sophia tensed. "Okay. Why are you working at a dental office when you could be doing literally anything else?" The question caught Sophia off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean you're smart. You're capable. You're good with people. You're obviously educated. So why are you answering phones for minimum wage?" Sophia set down the dish she was drying. The answer was complicated. It was about having no recent work history. About lost confidence. About feeling like she'd been erased and was just now starting to sketch herself back into existence. But what she said was, "I don't know what else I could do." Caroline looked at her for a long moment. "I think that's bullshit, but okay. We'll table it for now." Winter settled over the city like a weight. Sophia's apartment was poorly insulated, and she started sleeping in layers, her breath visible in the morning air. She was saving money, every penny that didn't go to rent or food, or the bus went into a jar she kept under her mattress. She didn't know what she was saving for exactly. Just more. More than this. More than barely surviving. It was December when she saw Patricia again. Sophia was at the grocery store, standing in front of the pasta aisle, and trying to decide if she could afford the good brand or if she needed to stick with the cheapest option, when she heard a familiar voice. "And I told her, if she can't even manage to show up on time, I'm finding someone else. The help these days, honestly." Sophia's entire body went cold. She turned slowly, and there was Patricia, standing with Ava near the produce section, both of them looking expensive and irritated. For a moment, Sophia thought about running, just leaving her cart and fleeing before they saw her. But something kept her rooted in place. Some spark of defiance she didn't know she still had. She pushed her cart toward them. Patricia saw her first. Her expression cycled through surprise, discomfort, and then settled on a fake warmth that made Sophia's stomach turn. "Sophia. Oh my goodness, Sophia, how are you? We've been meaning to reach out, haven't we, Ava?" Ava barely glanced up from her phone. I'm fine," Sophia said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "How are you both?" "Oh, we're wonderful. Busy, of course. The holidays are always so hectic. We're hosting Christmas at the house this year." "Well, you know how it is." Patricia's smile was poisonous. "Actually, the house has been wonderful. We've done some redecorating. Updated everything. It really needed a woman's touch. A woman's touch. As if Sophia hadn't lived there for 8 years. As if every room hadn't been arranged by her hands." "That's great," Sophia said flatly. "You look." Patricia's eyes traveled over Sophia's discount store clothes, her unstyled hair, the groceries in her cart that screamed poverty. "You look different. Are you eating enough, dear? You seem thin." It was the kind of comment that pretended to be concern, but was really just judgment wrapped in a bow. "I'm fine," Sophia repeated. "Well, good. Good." Patricia was already looking past her, ready to end this uncomfortable encounter. "We should let you get back to your shopping. Take care of yourself, Sophia." They walked away, and Sophia heard Ava's voice drift back. "God, how tragic. She's really fallen apart without James." Sophia stood there in the pasta aisle, shaking, tears burning hot behind her eyes. She abandoned her cart and walked straight out of the store, not stopping until she was 3 blocks away, gulping cold air and trying not to scream. That night, she sat on her mattress and looked at the jar of money under it. She'd saved almost $2,000. It had taken her months, living on nothing, and it still wasn't enough to change anything fundamental about her situation. But it was something. She opened her laptop, an ancient thing she'd bought at a pawn shop, and started searching. Not for jobs. She'd tried that route. Instead, she searched for something else. Business management courses. Accounting. Project management. By morning, Sophia was enrolled in 3 online certificate programs. She'd emptied the jar, invested every penny she'd saved, and committed herself to 6 months of intensive learning. If the world wouldn't value what she'd already done, she'd make them value what she could do next. The courses were brutal. Sophia would work her shift at the dental office, come home to her freezing apartment, and study until her eyes burned. Business accounting, financial management, project coordination, human resources certification. She studied on the bus. She studied during her lunch breaks, hunched over her laptop in the break room while Caroline watched with a mixture of concern and admiration. She studied until 2, 3 in the morning, fueled by instant coffee and a rage so pure it felt like electricity in her veins. Caroline was the only one who knew what she was doing. "You're going to burn out," she said one day, watching Sophia's hands shake as she tried to eat a sandwich and review financial statements at the same time. "I can't afford to burn out," Sophia replied. "Why are you pushing yourself like this?" Sophia looked up from her laptop. Her eyes felt gritty, her head ached, but her mind was clearer than it had been in years. "Because I need to be someone they can't dismiss. Someone they can't erase." Caroline didn't ask who they were. She just nodded and bought Sophia a better coffee. 3 months into her courses, Sophia received her first certification. It was just a piece of paper, really, a PDF she printed at the library because her apartment printer had died. But holding it felt like holding proof of her own existence. She was real. She was capable. She was more than what they'd said she was. Dr. Morrison noticed the change in her, started giving her more responsibilities, managing the office schedule, handling vendor negotiations, organizing the filing system that had been chaos when Sophia arrived. "You're wasted at the front desk," Dr. Morrison said one afternoon. "Have you thought about office management? As a career?" Sophia had thought about it. She'd thought about nothing else. "I'm working on it," she said. By month 4, Sophia had completed all her certifications. She had credentials now, proof of skills she'd been using for years but had never been valued for. She updated her resume, no longer just a homemaker with a gap in employment, but someone with actual qualifications, with certifications from recognized institutions. She started applying for jobs. Real jobs. Management positions at small companies. Office coordinator roles. Executive assistant positions. The rejections came fast and brutal. We've decided to go with someone with more direct experience. We're looking for someone who's been in the workforce more consistently. We found a candidate whose background better aligns with our needs. Each rejection felt like Patricia's voice in her head. You didn't contribute anything. But Sophia kept applying. 50 applications. 100. She refined her resume, practiced interview questions with Caroline, learned to talk about her 8 years of invisible labor in language that corporations would understand. I managed complex household operations for an extended family system, coordinating medical care, financial planning, and administrative support across multiple stakeholders. It sounded ridiculous, but it was also true. The breakthrough came from an unexpected place. Sophia was at the grocery store, a different one now. She couldn't stomach going back to where she'd seen Patricia, when her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Is this Sophia Mitchell? Yes. This is Rachel Chun from Cornerstone Family Management. We received your application for the Client Services Coordinator position. Are you available for an interview? Sophia's heart stopped. Cornerstone was a wealth management firm that specialized in helping high-net-worth families coordinate their affairs. It was exactly the kind of place where her particular skill set, managing complicated family dynamics, juggling multiple priorities, handling sensitive information, would actually be valued. Yes, she managed. Absolutely. When? The interview was in 3 days. Sophia spent 72 hours preparing. She researched the company until she could recite their client philosophy in her sleep. She practiced answers to every possible question. She bought a suit from a thrift store and had Caroline help her tailor it to actually fit. The morning of the interview, she stood in front of the cracked mirror in her bathroom and barely recognized herself. She looked professional, competent, like someone who deserved to be taken seriously. "You've got this," she whispered to her reflection. Her reflection didn't look convinced. Rachel Chin was a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and an even sharper suit. She didn't smile when Sophia entered the conference room, just gestured to a chair and dove straight into questions. "Walk me through your experience managing complex family systems." Sophia had prepared for this. She talked about coordinating medical appointments across multiple providers, managing household budgets, facilitating communication between family members with competing needs. She didn't mention that it had been her husband's family, that they'd never paid her, that they'd thrown her away the moment she stopped being useful. She just presented the facts of what she'd done, stripped of emotion, translated into corporate speak. Rachel's expression didn't change, but she took notes. A lot of notes. "You have recent certifications in project management and financial coordination. Why pursue those?" "I realized that the skills I'd been using informally needed formal validation," Sophia said. "I wanted to ensure I could demonstrate my capabilities in a way that would meet industry standards." "And why do you want to work with high-net-worth families specifically?" This was the dangerous question, the one where Sophia could let bitterness creep into her voice, where she could reveal that she wanted this job not just to rebuild her life, but to prove something to people who would never see her success. Instead, she said, "I understand the unique pressures of managing complex family dynamics. I know how to navigate sensitive situations with discretion. And I know how much difference it makes to have someone who genuinely cares about making the system work smoothly for everyone involved." Rachel looked at her for a long moment. Then she set down her pen. "Sophia, I'm going to be direct with you. Your resume concerns me. 8 years out of the formal workforce is significant. Most of my colleagues would have thrown your application in the trash." Sophia's stomach dropped. "But," Rachel continued, "I didn't. Do you know why?" "No. Because I was in your position once. Different circumstances, but the same core problem. Skills that no one valued because I'd been using them in the wrong context. So I'm going to ask you one question, and I need you to be completely honest with me." Sophia nodded, her mouth dry. "Are you running from something, or running toward something?" The question hit Sophia like a physical blow. She could lie. She could give the sanitized answer. But something in Rachel's eyes told her that anything less than the truth would end this opportunity right here. "Both," Sophia said quietly. "I'm running from people who made me believe I was worthless. And I'm running toward proving they were wrong." Rachel smiled for the first time. Good answer. Sophia started at Cornerstone 2 weeks later. The job was everything she'd hoped for, and more terrifying than she'd imagined. She was assigned to support 3 client families, each with their own labyrinth of needs, personalities, and complications. She coordinated everything from travel arrangements to estate planning meetings, from managing staff schedules to facilitating difficult family conversations. It was exactly what she'd been doing for James's family. Except now people thanked her. They paid her. They treated her like a professional instead of a servant. The salary was more money than Sophia had ever earned in her life. After her first paycheck, she sat in her apartment and stared at the direct deposit notification, unable to believe it was real. She could afford food. She could afford to turn on the heat. She could afford to stop living like she was slowly dying. Within 3 months, she'd moved to a better apartment. Nothing fancy, a 1-bedroom in a safer neighborhood with actual insulation and windows that closed all the way. But it was hers. She bought a Real bed, a table, dishes that weren't plastic. She built a life. Rachel became something like a mentor, though neither of them used that word. She pushed Sophia, gave her increasingly complex client assignments, taught her the unspoken rules of managing wealthy families. Never forget, Rachel said during one of their weekly check-ins, these people need you more than you need them. The moment you believe otherwise, you've lost your power. Sophia thought about Patricia, about Ava, about the way they'd acted like she should be grateful for scraps. She was done being grateful for scraps. 6 months into her job at Cornerstone, Sophia's phone rang while she was grocery shopping. She'd finally returned to the good grocery store, the one where she'd run into Patricia. She refused to let them steal even this small piece of her life. Sophia Mitchell? This is Linda Hartwell. I'm the executive director of the Hartwell Foundation. I got your name from Rachel Chin. Sophia paused in the produce section, her hand frozen over a display of apples she could actually afford now. I'm sorry. Rachel said you might be interested in a particular project we're working on. We're looking for someone to help coordinate a family reconciliation initiative. High conflict situation, multiple stakeholders, significant assets involved. She thought you might be perfect for it. What kind of family situation? I can't discuss details over the phone, but I can tell you it's well compensated and would be excellent for your portfolio. Would you be interested in meeting? Sophia's instinct was to say no. She had a good job. She was rebuilding. She didn't need to take risks. But something in her, that spark of defiance that had kept her studying until 3 a.m, that had pushed her to keep applying after 100 rejections, made her say, yes, I'm interested. They met at a coffee shop downtown. Linda Hartwell was in her 60s, elegant in the way that came from old money and good breeding. She looked at Sophia with the assessing gaze of someone who knew how to read people. I'll be direct, Linda said after they'd ordered. We have a client, a family with significant wealth and significant problems. The patriarch recently passed away, and his estate is complicated. There are disputes over assets, questions about care decisions that were made, and a daughter-in-law who was apparently pushed out of the family and is now making noise about pursuing legal action. Sophia's coffee went cold in her hands. The family wants to resolve this quietly. They're willing to make a reasonable settlement offer, but they need someone who can coordinate the negotiations, manage the emotional aspects, and help facilitate a clean resolution. Rachel suggested you might understand the nuances of this kind of situation. What makes you think I'm qualified? Sophia asked, even though her heart was pounding. Rachel said you have experience with family dynamics that got messy, and she said you're discreet. That's worth more than any MBA. Sophia took a sip of her coffee to buy time. This was dangerous territory. Getting involved in someone else's family warfare when she was still recovering from her own. But it was also an opportunity. A chance to help someone in a position she understood all too well. What's the timeline? She asked. We'd need someone to start within the month. The family is anxious to resolve this before things escalate further. And the compensation? Linda named a figure that made Sophia's carefully reconstructed composure crack for just a moment. It was more than she made in 6 months at Cornerstone. I'll need to think about it, Sophia said. Of course. But Sophia. Linda leaned forward. Rachel told me a little about your background. She said you'd understand what it's like to be on the other side of these negotiations. That's precisely why we want you. We need someone who won't let the family bully their way through this. Someone who'll fight for what's actually fair. After Linda left, Sophia sat in the coffee shop for another hour, staring at the business card with Linda's number. She thought about the daughter-in-law, whoever she was, trying to fight for acknowledgement from people who'd already decided she didn't matter. She thought about Patricia's voice. You didn't contribute anything. She thought about justice and revenge, and the difference between the two. Then she called Linda back and took the job. The family was called the Hawthorns. Sophia learned about them the way she'd learned everything else, through careful research and patient observation. Richard Hawthorne had built a commercial real estate empire worth hundreds of millions. When he died at 73, he'd left behind his wife Margaret, 2 children from his first marriage, and a son from his second marriage to Margaret. The son's widow, Diana, was the problem. Or rather, Diana refusing to disappear quietly was the problem. Sophia read through the file Linda had provided, and with every page, the parallels to her own story became more obvious. Diana had married Richard's son Thomas 10 years ago. She'd immediately been absorbed into the family machine, managing household staff, coordinating family events, handling Richard's increasingly complex medical needs as he aged. When Thomas died in a car accident 2 years ago, Diana had apparently expected to maintain her place in the family. Instead, she'd been systematically pushed out, cut off from family accounts, excluded from gatherings, treated like she'd been an employee whose services were no longer required. Now she was threatening to sue for what she claimed was owed to her. Years of unpaid labor, promises made by Richard before his death, assets she said Thomas had intended for her. The Hawthorns wanted Sophia to make Diana go away. Sophia's first meeting with the family was at their estate, a sprawling property that made James's house look like a cottage. Margaret Hawthorne received her in a sitting room that probably cost more than Sophia's annual salary to furnish. Ms. Mitchell, thank you for coming. Margaret's handshake was firm, her smile cold. Linda speaks very highly of you. I appreciate the opportunity. Let me be frank. This situation with Diana is unfortunate. She's a sweet girl, but she's misunderstood her position in this family. Thomas loved her, of course, but that doesn't entitle her to make claims on the family estate. We're hoping you can help her understand that. Sophia kept her expression neutral, professional. I'm here to facilitate a fair resolution for all parties. Something flickered in Margaret's eyes. Displeasure, maybe, that Sophia hadn't immediately agreed with her framing. Yes, well, fair is precisely what we're offering. We're prepared to give her a generous settlement, far more than she deserves, frankly, if she'll sign a comprehensive release and agree to cease all contact with the family. What does Diana want? Sophia asked. What do any of them want? This came from a woman who'd been standing by the window, Catherine, Richard's daughter from his first marriage. Recognition. Validation. Money she didn't earn. Sophia looked at Catherine and saw Ava. The same contempt. The same absolute certainty that she was the one being wronged by someone else's audacity. I'd like to meet with Diana, Sophia said. Understand her perspective before we move forward with any proposals. Margaret's smile tightened. Is that necessary? If you want a resolution that will actually hold up legally and won't result in further conflict down the line, yes. It's necessary. It was the first time in 8 years that Sophia had stood her ground with people like this. The first time she'd looked at wealthy, entitled people who were used to getting their way and said, no. It felt like breathing after being underwater. Diana agreed to meet at a neutral location, a conference room in a downtown office building. Sophia arrived early, her heart hammering in a way that had nothing to do with professional nerves and everything to do with the fact that meeting Diana felt like meeting herself 2 years ago. When Diana walked in, Sophia saw it immediately. The careful way she held herself, like she was trying to take up as little space as possible. The exhaustion in her eyes that came from fighting battles no one else thought were worth fighting. Ms. Mitchell? Diana's voice was quiet, uncertain. Please call me Sophia. Thank you for meeting with me. They sat across from each other, and for a moment neither spoke. Sophia had prepared questions, a whole strategy for this conversation. But looking at Diana, she threw the script away. Tell me what happened, she said. Not the legal version. The real version. Diana's eyes filled with tears so quickly it was like she'd been waiting for someone to ask. For someone to care enough to want the truth. And she told Sophia everything. How she'd met Thomas at a charity event and fallen in love with his kindness, his humor, the way he seemed different from the rest of his family. how she'd married into the Hawthorns and been immediately put to work, managing Richard's care schedule, coordinating Margaret's social calendar, raising Catherine's children when Catherine was too busy building her own business empire. How she'd done it willingly at first, out of love for Thomas and a genuine desire to be part of a family. How slowly, over the years, it had become less about love and more about obligation, about being useful, about earning her place. How Thomas had promised her, again and again, that she didn't need to worry, that his family would take care of her, that she was valued. And then Thomas died, and within weeks, everything changed. "They took my keys to the house," Diana said, her voice breaking. "The house Thomas and I lived in. They said it belonged to the family trust, and I was just staying there temporarily. They changed the codes on the gates. They stopped inviting me to family dinners. Margaret told me I needed to move forward with my life and suggested I should find work elsewhere." "Elsewhere," Sophia repeated. "She offered to write me a reference. For a job. Like I'd been their employee instead of Thomas's wife." Sophia felt rage building in her chest, hot and familiar. "What did Richard promise you?" Diana pulled out a folder from her bag. Inside were letters. Handwritten notes from Richard to Diana, thanking her for her care, promising that she would always be taken care of, that the family would never forget what she'd contributed. "He said he was changing his will," Diana said, "about 6 months before he died. He said he was making sure I'd have security, that Thomas would have wanted that. He made me promise not to tell Margaret. He said he'd handle it. And when he died, the will didn't mention me at all. I asked Margaret about it, and she said I must have misunderstood, that Richard would never have made provisions for a daughter-in-law in his estate plan. She made me feel like I was crazy, like I'd imagined the whole thing." Sophia looked at the letters spread across the table, looked at Diana's trembling hands, looked at the ghost of her own past sitting across from her in a different body, but the same broken posture. "Diana," she said carefully, "what do you want? Really want?" Diana wiped her eyes. "I want them to admit that I mattered, that the 10 years I spent taking care of their family meant something. I don't even care about the money. I mean, I need it. I can barely afford rent now. But that's not why I'm doing this. I just want them to acknowledge that I existed, that I wasn't invisible." Sophia understood that need so deeply it hurt. "Okay," she said. "Then that's what we're going to get you." Sophia spent the next 2 weeks building Diana's case with the precision of someone who'd been waiting their entire life for this moment. She didn't just review the letters Richard had written. She dug deeper. She requested medical records showing who had coordinated Richard's care. She pulled household account statements showing who had managed expenses. She interviewed staff members who'd worked at the Hawthorne estate, people who remembered Diana as the one who actually ran things while Margaret took credit. She built a picture of 10 years of invisible labor, documented and undeniable. But more than that, she started to understand something about the Hawthorns, something that made her pulse quicken with possibility. They were falling apart. Without Diana managing the household systems, things had started to crack. The estate staff were in chaos. No one knew who was supposed to approve what, schedules conflicted, bills went unpaid. Catherine's children, who Diana had essentially raised, were struggling in school without her support. Margaret's social calendar, once impeccably managed, had become a disaster of double bookings and forgotten commitments. The Hawthorns needed Diana. They just didn't want to admit it. Sophia called a meeting with the family's legal team first, a power move that established her as someone who dealt with equals, not supplicants. "I've reviewed Diana's position," she told the 3 lawyers sitting across from her. "And I think we need to discuss what a fair settlement actually looks like." The lead attorney, a man named Harrison who wore his condescension like cologne, leaned back in his chair. "Ms. Mitchell, the family has already been quite generous. They're prepared to offer Ms. Diana $300,000 and a full release. $300,000 for 10 years of work." Sophia kept her voice even. "Let's do some math." Diana coordinated all household operations, managed medical care, provided childcare, organized social events, and handled administrative duties. If you paid someone to do each of those jobs separately, at market rate for 10 years, what would that cost? Harrison shifted uncomfortably. "That's not how inheritance law works. I'm not talking about inheritance. I'm talking about unjust enrichment. Richard Hawthorne received substantial value from Diana's unpaid labor. That value can be calculated and claimed." One of the junior attorneys, a woman named Melissa, looked up from her notes. You'd have to prove that there was an expectation of payment. I have letters from Richard promising to take care of Diana financially. I have testimony from household staff about the scope of her work. And I have evidence that after Diana left, the family had to hire multiple people to replace her. People they're paying significantly. Sophia opened her laptop and turned it to face them. On the screen was a spreadsheet she'd spent 3 days building, calculating the market value of every service Diana had provided. The total was over $2 million. Harrison's face went pale. This is aggressive litigation tactics. We're trying to avoid litigation. Then make an offer that reflects reality, Sophia said. Because if this goes to court, I'm not just going to argue for back payment. I'm going to subpoena every family financial record, every account Diana touched, every decision she influenced. And I'm going to show a jury exactly how the Hawthorns built their empire on the backs of people they refused to compensate. It was a bluff, mostly, but it was also true enough to make them nervous. The meeting ended with Harrison promising to discuss options with the family. Sophia walked out of that conference room feeling something she hadn't felt in years. Power. Margaret called Sophia directly the next day, bypassing Linda entirely. Ms. Mitchell, I think we need to talk. They met at the Hawthorne estate again. This time, Margaret didn't offer tea or pleasantries. She got straight to the point. What is it you think you're doing? I'm representing Diana's interests, Sophia said calmly. You're supposed to be facilitating a resolution, not escalating a conflict. A resolution requires both parties to feel they've been treated fairly. Diana doesn't feel that way. And frankly, after reviewing the facts, I understand why. Margaret's composure cracked slightly. Diana was family. We treated her well. She had a beautiful home, access to everything she could want. Access that you revoked the moment Thomas died. Because she was no longer Thomas's wife. Because her position in this family changed. Her position, Sophia repeated, letting the words hang in the air. Like she was an employee, not a daughter-in-law. Not someone who'd spent a decade caring for your family out of love. Margaret stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter, more dangerous. I know who you are, Ms. Mitchell. I had you investigated. Sophia's stomach dropped, but she kept her expression neutral. Did you? I know about your husband. About his family. About how they transitioned you out after his death. Margaret turned to face her. So I know exactly what you're doing here. You're not helping Diana. You're working out your own bitterness. The accusation should have stung. Should have made Sophia defensive. Instead, it made her smile. You're absolutely right, she said. I know exactly what Diana's going through. I know what it's like to give everything to a family that treats you like furniture. I know what it's like to be told you didn't contribute anything while you're standing in a house you maintained, looking at children you raised, talking to people whose lives you held together. She stood up, gathering her things. So yes, Margaret, I understand Diana better than you ever could, which is precisely why I'm going to make sure she gets what she deserves. Not what you think she deserves. What she actually legally, morally deserves. You're making a mistake, Margaret said coldly. This family has resources you can't imagine. We can bury her in legal fees. We can drag this out for years. You could, Sophia agreed. But you won't. Because the longer this takes, the more damage it does to your reputation. The more people start asking questions about how the Hawthorns treat the women who marry into this family. The more your social circle starts to wonder if maybe Diana has a point. She moved toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Margaret, I noticed you've had to hire 3 new staff members since Diana left. A house manager, a personal assistant, and a family coordinator. You're paying them a combined salary of $200,000 a year. Diana did all of that for free. So when you talk about what this family can afford, remember, you literally can't afford not to settle this fairly. The settlement negotiations took another month. Sophia pushed for everything Diana deserved. Back payment for services rendered, compensation for emotional distress, a formal apology from the family. The Hawthorns fought every line, every dollar, every word. But Sophia was patient. She'd learned patience the hard way, in a freezing apartment, studying until her eyes burned, rebuilding herself atom by atom. She could wait them out. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Catherine's teenage daughter, Emily, one of the children Diana had essentially raised, showed up at Sophia's office unannounced. I need to talk to you, Emily said, her eyes red from crying. About Diana. Sophia invited her in, offered her water, waited. I miss her, Emily said simply. She was more of a mom to me than my actual mom. Mom was always working, always busy. Diana was the one who picked me up from school, who helped with my homework, who sat with me when I was sad. Does your mother know you're here? Sophia asked gently. No, but I don't care. They're wrong about Diana. They're wrong about everything. Emily pulled out her phone. I have texts from the last 2 years. Diana and I stayed in touch even after they told her to stay away. She never said anything bad about the family. She was there for me when no one else was. She showed Sophia the messages. Hundreds of them. Diana offering homework help, emotional support, advice about friends and school and life. Never asking for anything in return. Just loving a child she'd raised. Even after that child's family had cast her out. Can I testify? Emily asked. If this goes to court. Because I want to tell people what Diana meant to me. What she still means to me. Sophia looked at this brave teenager who was willing to stand up to her own family for the truth. I'll keep that option available, she said. But Emily? Thank you. This helps more than you know. After Emily left, Sophia called Harrison. We need to talk about Emily Hawthorne, she said. There was a long pause. What about her? She came to see me today. Wants to testify on Diana's behalf. Wants to tell everyone how Diana was more of a mother to her than Catherine ever was. Another pause, longer this time. That would be unfortunate. For everyone. Wouldn't it? Can you imagine what the press would do with that story? Daughter testifies against own mother in family inheritance battle. That's headline material. What do you want, Ms. Mitchell? I want what I've always wanted. Fair compensation for Diana. $1.5 million. A formal acknowledgement from the family of her contributions. And a written apology from Margaret specifically. That's half of what she's actually owed, Sophia interrupted. And significantly less than what you'll spend in legal fees and reputation management if this goes to trial and Emily testifies. So really, Harrison, I'm doing you a favor. She could practically hear him calculating in his head. I'll discuss it with the family, he said finally. You do that. And Harrison, you have 48 hours. After that, I'm filing a lawsuit and holding a press conference. Your choice. The Hawthorns agreed to settle. $1.5 million. A formal letter acknowledging Diana's invaluable contributions to the family over 10 years of devoted service. And a personal apology from Margaret that Sophia made sure was not some lawyer-drafted corporate speak, but actual words that expressed actual remorse. The day the papers were signed, Sophia met Diana at a coffee shop near Cornerstone's office. Diana was crying before she even sat down. I can't believe you did this, she said. I can't believe. I thought I was going crazy. I thought maybe they were right, and I was just being entitled and… You weren't, Sophia said firmly. You weren't crazy. You weren't entitled. You were exploited. And now you've been compensated. It's not just the money. Diana wiped her eyes. It's the letter. Seeing them actually write down that I mattered. That I contributed. That's what I needed. That acknowledgement. Sophia understood. God, did she understand? They talked for another hour. Diana was planning to go back to school, to finish the degree she'd abandoned when she married Thomas. She was thinking about moving to a different city, starting fresh somewhere the Hawthorne name didn't cast a shadow. What about you? Diana asked. What's next for you? Sophia had been thinking about that question for weeks now. I'm not sure, she admitted. But I know I'm done working for other people's families. I think I want to help more people like you. Like us. Us. Sophia took a breath. She hadn't planned to tell Diana her own story. But sitting there, looking at this woman who'd fought so hard for recognition, she found herself talking. About James. About his family. About being erased. Diana listened with the expression of someone hearing their own story in someone else's voice. Did you ever get justice? Diana asked when Sophia finished. Did they ever acknowledge what they did to you? No, Sophia said. They didn't. Are you going to make them? The question hung in the air between them. Was she? Sophia thought about Patricia in the grocery store, looking at her with pity. About Ava's laugh in the pasta aisle. About Oliver dismissing 8 years of her life with a shrug. She thought about the house that had been hers, the family that had used her, the man she'd loved who'd promised she'd always be taken care of. She thought about justice and revenge and the difference between the two. Maybe, she said finally. Maybe I am. The idea came to Sophia 3 days later, while she was reviewing files at Cornerstone. She was supposed to be working on a new client case, but her mind kept drifting to her own situation, to James's family, to everything they'd taken from her. The problem was, she had no legal standing. She'd accepted their settlement, however small. She'd signed papers. She'd moved on, at least legally. But there was more than one kind of justice. Sophia opened her laptop and started searching. Not for lawyers this time. For something else. She searched for Patricia's name. Found her on social media, still posting about family is everything, with photos of gatherings at the house. Sophia's house. She searched for Ava. Found her LinkedIn profile, where she listed herself as CEO of a marketing consultancy. The business address was the house. Sophia's house. Ava was running her business out of a home office in what used to be Sophia's guest room. She searched for Oliver. Found him on Facebook, posting about his investment properties. One of them looked familiar. Very familiar. It was a rental property that James had bought, that Sophia had managed, that she'd spent weekends fixing up and finding tenants for. They'd taken everything, and they were profiting from it, from her work. Sophia sat back in her chair, her mind racing. She couldn't sue them, but she could do something else. She could show them, and everyone in their social circle, exactly what they'd done. She could make visible the invisible labor they'd stolen. She could force them to confront what they'd taken. Not through courts. Through truth. It would take planning. It would take patience. It would take everything she'd learned over the past 2 years about strategy and documentation, and making people see what they'd rather ignore. But Sophia had patience now. She'd rebuilt herself once. She could do this. She opened a new document on her laptop and titled it Project Justice. Then she started to plan. The first step was research. Sophia spent her evenings and weekends digging through everything she could find about James's family. Not just social media, though there was plenty there, but property records, business filings, public documents. She discovered that the house was in a complicated trust situation. James had owned it, but when he died, Patricia had somehow gotten herself added as a trustee with Oliver as co-trustee. They'd then transferred the property into an LLC that Patricia controlled. It was technically legal, probably, but it was also absolutely not what James would have wanted. She found that Ava's business, the one she was running out of the house, wasn't doing as well as her social media suggested. In fact, she was struggling. Behind on payments to vendors, losing clients, barely keeping afloat. She discovered that Oliver's investment properties were mortgaged to the hilt. He was playing real estate investor with money he didn't have, using the rental income from properties that should have been at least partially Sophia's. They were a house of cards. They just didn't know it yet. Sophia created a spreadsheet documenting every contribution she'd made during her 8 years with James's family. Every meal cooked, every appointment coordinated, every problem solved. She assigned dollar values based on market rates for similar services. The total was staggering. Over $800,000 in unpaid labor. But more than that, she started documenting the lies they'd told about her. The social media posts that erased her from family photos. The comments about how she'd never worked. The narrative they'd constructed where she was a burden instead of the backbone. She saved everything. Screenshot after screenshot. Building a case not for court, but for something more powerful. Public opinion. Caroline noticed the change in her. "You're plotting something," she said one day over lunch. "I can tell. Is it that obvious?" Sophia asked. "Only to someone who knows you. Want to tell me what it is?" Sophia hesitated. Then she told Caroline everything. About James's family, about what they'd done, about what she was planning. Caroline listened, her expression unreadable. When Sophia finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Are you sure?" she finally asked. "Once you do this, there's no going back. They'll know you're not the person they thought you were." "Good," Sophia said. "I'm not that person anymore. I'm done being invisible." Caroline smiled. "Then let me help." They spent the next 3 months preparing. Caroline, it turned out, had connections Sophia hadn't known about. A friend who ran a popular blog about women's issues. Another friend who worked in local media. A cousin who was a lawyer specializing in elder care and family exploitation. They built a strategy that was part exposure, part education, part revenge. Sophia would tell her story, but not just her story. She'd make it universal. She'd talk about invisible labor, about how families exploit women, about the economic reality of unpaid care work. She'd use her own experience as a case study, but frame it as part of a larger systemic problem. It would be harder to dismiss that way, harder to paint her as just a bitter ex-daughter-in-law when she was highlighting an issue that affected millions of women. Caroline's friend with the blog agreed to publish Sophia's essay. They'd promote it heavily, time it for maximum impact, make it part of a larger conversation about women's work and family dynamics. But Sophia wanted more than just an essay. She wanted James's family to feel it, to understand viscerally what they'd done. So she planned something else, something more direct. She was going to show up at one of Patricia's famous family dinners, the ones Sophia used to cook for, used to plan, used to clean up after. The ones where Patricia now played hostess in Sophia's house, taking credit for a hospitality Sophia had created. She was going to walk into that house and remind them exactly who she was. And she was going to bring witnesses. Patricia's annual autumn dinner was legendary in their social circle. Sophia knew because she'd been the one who'd made it legendary. She'd spent weeks planning each one. The menu, the decorations, the seating arrangements that navigated complicated family politics. She'd cooked for days, coordinated staff, ensured everything was perfect. And Patricia had stood at the head of the table, accepting compliments, glowing in the warmth of praise for hospitality Sophia had created. This year's dinner was scheduled for the first Saturday in October. Sophia knew because it was still posted on the family calendar app, the one she'd set up, the one they'd never bothered to remove her access from. She spent the week before in a state of focused calm. She'd written her essay. Caroline's friend had scheduled it to publish the morning of the dinner. The local news outlet was ready with a follow-up piece about unpaid family labor. Everything was aligned. On Friday night, Caroline came over to Sophia's apartment. The nice one now, the one with actual furniture and heat and windows that closed. Last chance to back out, Caroline said, though her eyes said she knew Sophia wouldn't. I'm not backing out. They're going to hate you for this. They already hate me. They just do it quietly behind closed doors, while pretending I never existed. Sophia looked at her friend. I need them to see me. I need them to acknowledge what they did, even if that acknowledgement is rage. Caroline pulled her into a hug. Then let's make sure they see you. Saturday morning, Sophia's essay went live. The Invisible Woman. How I spent 8 years building someone else's life, and was thrown away when I wasn't useful anymore. It was long, detailed, unflinching. She wrote about meeting James, about falling in love, about believing she was joining a family. She wrote about the slow accumulation of responsibilities, small favors that became expectations that became obligations that became her entire existence. She wrote about cooking every meal, managing every schedule, coordinating every detail of lives that weren't her own, about raising children who called her aunt but relied on her like a mother, about managing a household, a business, a sick man's medical care, while being told she didn't work. She wrote about James's death, about the funeral where no one asked if she was okay, about watching them divide his belongings like she was already gone, about being told the house, her home, wasn't really hers, that nothing was hers, that 8 years of her life had been worth exactly one small settlement and a dismissal. But she also wrote about what came after, about rebuilding, about discovering that the skills they'd told her were worthless were actually valuable, just not to them, about learning to see her own labor as real work deserving of real compensation. She wrote about Diana, without using names, and how helping another woman fight for recognition had taught her that justice delayed wasn't justice denied. It was justice waiting for the right moment. The essay ended with a question. How many women are invisible in their own families? How many of us are told our work doesn't count because we did it out of love? And what would happen if we all suddenly stopped? Within hours, it was everywhere. Shared thousands of times. Picked up by major women's websites. Discussed on social media. Women commenting with their own stories. Hundreds of them, thousands of them, all saying this was me, or this is my mother, or this is my sister. The local news ran their piece at noon, interviewing Sophia about unpaid care work and its economic impact. They mentioned that she'd provided care for a local family. Didn't name them, but did mention the neighborhood, the type of business they ran. Anyone who knew Patricia would be able to put the pieces together. By 2 p.m., Sophia's phone was exploding. Messages from old friends. From women she didn't know thanking her. From journalists wanting interviews. Nothing from James's family. But Sophia knew they'd seen it. She could feel it. The way you can feel a storm building even before the first drop of rain. At 5 p.m., she got dressed for dinner. She didn't dress like someone asking for permission to exist. She dressed like someone who knew exactly what she was worth. A black dress that was elegant but not apologetic. Heels that made her tall. Hair and makeup perfect. She looked successful. Powerful. Like someone who'd survived something terrible and come out stronger. Caroline drove her to the house. Their plan was simple. Sophia would walk in during dinner. She wouldn't make a scene, wouldn't have to. Her presence would be the scene. And Caroline would wait outside, ready to document anything that happened, ready to call for help if needed. "You're sure about this?" Caroline asked as they pulled up to the familiar driveway. Sophia looked at the house. Her house. The one she'd maintained and improved and loved. The one where she'd built a life that had been taken from her. "I'm sure." She got out of the car. The front door was unlocked. It always was during parties. Patricia liked the open hospitality. Sophia walked in without knocking. The foyer looked different. They'd repainted, changed the artwork, erased her aesthetic choices, and replaced them with Patricia's taste. She could hear voices from the dining room. Laughter. The clink of glasses. Sophia walked toward them, her heels clicking on the hardwood floors she used to polish. She reached the dining room doorway and stopped. The table was full. Patricia at the head, where she'd always sat. Ava and her husband. Oliver and his girlfriend. Several family friends Sophia recognized. They were eating salmon, one of the dishes Sophia used to make, though she could tell from here that whoever made this version had oversalted it. Patricia saw her first. The wine glass froze halfway to her lips. Her face went sheet white, then flushed red. "What are you doing here?" Patricia's voice cracked through the room like a whip. Every head turned. Sophia felt the weight of a dozen stares, saw recognition dawn in familiar faces, saw shock and confusion and the beginning of anger. She stepped into the room. "Hello, Patricia." "Ava." "Oliver." She kept her voice steady. "Calm. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. You need to leave." Ava stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. "Right now. This is private property." "It's my property," Sophia said. "Or it was. This was my home for 8 years. I painted these walls. I chose that chandelier. I planted the garden you can see through that window. You have no right to be here," Oliver said, standing now too. "Don't I?" Sophia looked around the table at the faces staring at her. Some of them she'd cooked for, cleaned for, done favors for. "I have no right to the house I maintained, the home I built, the life I created." "You signed away your rights," Patricia hissed. "We gave you a settlement. You gave me $30,000 for 8 years of work. I calculated what you actually owed me. Want to know the number?" The room was silent now. Even the people who didn't know her were leaning forward, caught up in the tension. $843,000. That's the market value of the services I provided to this family. Cooking, cleaning, childcare, medical coordination, household management, administrative support, event planning. Sophia's voice was getting stronger, louder. "I did the work of 6 different jobs, and you gave me $30,000 and called it generous. We gave you a home." Patricia shouted. "We gave you a family. You gave me work and called it love," Sophia shot back. "You gave me obligations and called them privileges. And the moment I stopped being useful, you threw me away like garbage." One of the dinner guests, a woman Sophia had met a few times, someone from Patricia's social circle, spoke up quietly. "Is this the daughter-in-law from that essay? The one that's been shared everywhere today?" Patricia's face went even redder. "You wrote that essay? That hit piece?" "I wrote the truth," Sophia said. "Every word of it is true, and you know it. You're trying to destroy us." Ava's voice was shrill now. "You're bitter because James died and you didn't get to keep living off of us." "Living off of you?" Sophia laughed, and it was not a kind sound. "Ava, I raised your son. I picked Lucas up from school every single day for 5 years. I helped him with his homework. I sat with him when he was sick. I taught him to ride a bike because you were too busy. And when I left, his grades dropped so badly you had to hire a tutor. You want to talk about living off someone? You built your career on my unpaid labor." Ava looked like she'd been slapped. Sophia turned to Oliver. "And you're running those rental properties James bought, the ones I managed, the ones I found tenants for and maintained. You're collecting rent on work I did. How much have you made off those properties since James died? 50,000? 100,000? That's money you earned because of labor I provided for free. Oliver's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Finally, Sophia looked at Patricia. And you're sitting at the head of this table, in this house, playing the gracious hostess. Taking credit for a hospitality I created. These dinner parties that everyone loves? I built them. The reputation you have for being a wonderful host? I earned that for you. Every single piece of your social standing that comes from this home, from these gatherings, from this image of family warmth. It was my work. My time. My effort. Get out, Patricia said, but her voice was shaking now. Get out of my house. It's not your house. The words exploded out of Sophia. James bought this house. I maintained it. I improved it. I turned it into a home. And you stole it. You manipulated the estate, you pushed me out, and you stole the life I built. We don't owe you anything, Patricia said, but she sounded less certain now. You owe me 8 years of my life. You owe me recognition. You owe me an apology. Sophia's voice dropped to something quieter, more dangerous. But I'm not here to collect. I'm here to make sure you know, and everyone in your world knows, exactly what you did. She pulled out her phone, pulled up the essay, the one that was still being shared thousands of times. This morning, 40,000 people read about what you did to me. By tonight, it'll be hundreds of thousands. And they're all asking the same question. How many women have the Hawthorns used and discarded? You vindictive bitch, Ava spat. No, Sophia said. I'm just someone who finally found her voice. And I'm not the only one. There are others. Women who worked for this family. Who were paid poverty wages while you lived in luxury. Women whose stories I've collected, whose experiences I've documented. You want to call me bitter? Call me vindictive? Fine. But you can't call me a liar. Everything I said is true. She looked around the table one more time. At the faces that had once been familiar, that had once been something like family. They looked smaller now. Diminished. I came here tonight to remind you that I existed. That I mattered. That you can erase me from your photos and your stories. But you can't erase what I did for you. Every time you walk through this house, you'll know I built it. Every time you host a dinner, you'll know I created that tradition. Every time you benefit from the systems I put in place, you'll know you stole them from me. She turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. Oh, and Patricia? The salmon's oversalted. You should really get a better cook. She walked out. Behind her, she heard the explosion of voices. Arguments, accusations, chaos. She heard Patricia's voice rising in fury, heard glasses breaking, heard someone crying. She kept walking. Caroline was waiting by the car, her phone out, recording the house. You did it, Caroline said, her voice full of wonder. You actually did it. Sophia got in the car, and only then did she start shaking. Adrenaline and emotion catching up to her all at once. Take me home, she said. Caroline drove, and Sophia watched the house disappear in the rearview mirror. Her house. Not anymore. But also not Patricia's either, not really. Not now that everyone would know the truth. The fallout was spectacular. By Sunday morning, Sophia's essay had been picked up by national outlets. Think pieces about unpaid labor. Discussions about invisible work. Women everywhere sharing their own stories of being used by families who saw them as free help. Patricia tried to do damage control, posted a statement on social media about misunderstandings and one-sided stories. It got ratioed so hard she deleted it within an hour. Ava's business lost 3 clients who cited the essay and said they couldn't work with someone who'd exploited family members. Oliver tried to defend his family in a Facebook post that became a meme about entitled men who don't understand emotional labor. But more than the public shaming, more than the social consequences, something else happened. Women started reaching out to Sophia. Dozens of them, then hundreds. Women who'd been in similar situations. Women who needed help navigating family exploitation. Women who wanted advice on documenting their work, calculating its value, demanding recognition. Sophia found herself becoming something she'd never expected, an advocate. She started doing consultations, helping women document invisible labor, strategize negotiations with families, understand their legal options. She partnered with lawyers who specialized in family law and elder care exploitation. She connected women with resources. Within 3 months, She'd left Cornerstone and started her own practice, Mitchell Family Advocacy. She helped daughters negotiate fair compensation for parental care. She helped divorced women document years of unpaid household labor for divorce settlements. She helped widows fight for what they were owed from estates that tried to exclude them. She turned her pain into purpose. And she was good at it, really good, because she understood in her bones what it felt like to be invisible, to be used, to be told your work didn't matter. 1 year after the dinner party confrontation, Diana called her. "I saw the Forbes piece about you," Diana said. "About your business. Sophia, you're helping so many people." "I learned from the best," Sophia said. "You taught me that fighting back was possible." "No," Diana said softly. "You taught me. You showed me what I was worth. I'm just glad you finally saw it in yourself." 2 years after James died, Sophia got a letter. It came via a lawyer's office, not Harrison, someone new. Inside was a check and a note. The check was for $843,000. The exact amount she'd calculated her work was worth. The note was from Lucas, Ava's son, the boy Sophia had raised. "Dear Sophia, I'm 18 now, old enough to access the trust fund my grandmother set up for me, old enough to understand what my family did to you. When my dad died, you were the only one who was really there for me. You helped me with my homework every night. You came to my soccer games when my mom was working. You taught me how to cook. You were basically my parent for years. And they treated you like you were nothing. I've been following your work. I've read everything you've written about invisible labor and family exploitation. I understand now what I was too young to see then. This money won't fix what they did to you, but it's what you're owed. I calculated it the way you taught me to calculate things, by adding up what the work was actually worth. My family will be angry when they find out I did this. I don't care. It's the right thing to do. Thank you for everything you did for me. Thank you for showing me what it looks like to stand up for yourself. Thank you for being more of a parent to me than most of my actual family. You deserved better then. You deserve recognition now. With love and respect, Lucas." Sophia read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. She didn't cash the check immediately. First, she framed it, not out of greed, but as a reminder that sometimes justice came from unexpected places, that sometimes the people you helped remembered, that sometimes the work you did invisibly was seen after all. Then she endorsed the check and deposited half into her business account, money to help more women fight back. The other half she put toward a down payment on a house. Not the house she'd lost. A new house. One that was entirely hers. 3 years after James's death, Sophia gave a TEDx talk. She stood on stage in front of hundreds of people and told her story. Not with bitterness anymore, but with clarity, with power. "I spent 8 years being invisible," she said. 8 years doing work that mattered but wasn't valued because I did it out of love, because I did it in private, because I did it as a woman in a family. When that family discarded me, I could have stayed invisible. I could have accepted their narrative, that I didn't contribute, that I didn't matter, that I was just a burden they generously supported. Instead, I did something radical. I made myself seen. I documented my work. I calculated its value. I demanded recognition. And I discovered that I wasn't alone, that millions of women were doing the same invisible labor, being told it didn't count, being erased from the economic systems that depend on their work. This isn't just my story. It's our story, and it's time we stopped being invisible. The applause was thunderous. After the talk, dozens of women came up to her, thanking her, sharing their stories, asking for help. Sophia listened to each one, took notes, made connections, promised to follow up, because that was her work now, making the invisible visible, giving voice to the voiceless, fighting for women who'd been told they didn't matter. She'd turned her pain into power, her erasure into advocacy, her victimhood into victory, not because she'd destroyed the people who hurt her, though there was a bitter satisfaction in knowing that Patricia's social standing had never recovered, that Ava's business struggled, that Oliver had to sell his investment properties at a loss, but because she'd built something bigger than revenge. She'd built a movement. 5 years after James's death, Sophia was at a coffee shop working on her laptop when someone approached her table. "Sophia Mitchell?" She looked up, a young woman, maybe 25, holding one of Sophia's books. The Invisible Economy, How Women's Unpaid Labor Subsidizes the World. "Yes, I just wanted to thank you. I'm in a situation with my boyfriend's family. They expect me to help with everything, and when I ask about being compensated or at least acknowledged, they act like I'm being selfish. Your book helped me understand that I wasn't crazy, that my work has value." Sophia smiled. "What did you do?" I presented them with a bill. Itemized. Everything I'd done for the past 2 years, calculated at market rate. The young woman grinned. They were furious. But they also paid. Because once they saw it written down, once they saw the actual dollar amount, they couldn't pretend it was nothing anymore. "Good for you," Sophia said. "Seriously. That takes courage. I learned it from you." After the woman left, Sophia sat with her coffee and thought about the woman she'd been 5 years ago. Broken. Erased. Invisible. She thought about that night in the grocery store, seeing Patricia and feeling so small. She thought about the studio apartment above the laundromat, the minimum wage job, the ramen dinners, the feeling that she'd been deleted from the world. And she thought about the woman she was now. Successful. Heard. Seen. Not because she'd made them acknowledge her, though she had. Not because she'd gotten financial compensation, though that had come too from unexpected sources. But because she'd learned to see herself, to value her own work, to recognize her own strength, to understand that being invisible had never been about her worthlessness. It had been about their blindness. She opened her laptop and started writing. Not another essay or article or book chapter. A letter. "Dear Patricia, Ava, and Oliver. It's been 5 years since James died. 5 years since you told me I didn't matter. 5 years since you erased me from your family and your history. I'm writing to tell you that I forgive you. Not because what you did was okay. It wasn't. Not because you deserve forgiveness. You don't. But because holding on to rage was keeping me tethered to you, and I'm done being defined by your cruelty. I've built a life beyond your recognition. I've helped hundreds of women escape situations like the one you put me in. I've turned the pain you caused into purpose. You thought erasing me would make me disappear. Instead, you made me unforgettable. Every woman I help sees a reflection of her own invisible labor. Every story I tell echoes with recognition. Every time someone documents their work, calculates its value, demands recognition. That's me multiplied. That's the legacy of what you tried to erase. So thank you in a twisted way. Thank you for showing me what it looks like when people refuse to see value in front of them. Thank you for teaching me that sometimes the people who should love you the most are the ones who hurt you the worst. Thank you for breaking me so completely that I had no choice but to rebuild myself stronger. I don't need your apology anymore. I don't need your acknowledgement. I don't need anything from you. I just needed you to know you didn't win. I did. Sophia. She read it over once, then deleted it. Some letters didn't need to be sent. Some victories didn't need to be announced. She closed her laptop and walked out into the sunshine. She had a meeting with a new client. A woman whose in-laws had been using her as free childcare for 5 years. A woman who was just starting to understand that her work had value. That she had value. Sophia was going to help her see it, document it, demand recognition for it. Because that was the real revenge in the end. Not making them pay, but making sure no other woman had to go through what she'd gone through. Not destruction. Creation. Not vengeance. Justice. And in the space where pain used to live, Sophia had built something beautiful. She'd built herself. Thank you so much for watching Sophia's journey from invisible to unforgettable. Her story represents countless women who've been told their work doesn't matter simply because they did it out of love, in private, as part of family. I'd love to hear from you. Was Sophia's revenge justified? Which family member angered you the most, Patricia, Ava, or Oliver? What would you have done in Sophia's situation? Have you or someone you know experienced invisible labor exploitation? Please comment your country below. I love knowing how far these stories of justice and empowerment reach across the world. If this story resonated with you, please consider hitting the like button to help this story reach more people who need to hear it. Subscribing for more empowering revenge and redemption stories. Sharing this video with someone who needs to hear that their work matters. Leaving a super thanks if you want to support more stories about women reclaiming their power. Remember, your work has value. Your labor matters. And you are never, ever invisible, even when people refuse to see you. Thank you for being part of Sophia's journey. See you in the next story. Red Heart.